Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farrand, owner of the company Horns of Odin. Before we get into the show, I do have to plug our Patreon, and might be a little bit different this week. Hopefully, I want to get everyone to go and check out Patreon/Nordic Mythology podcast, but also give us some feedback on what you think we can improve on and do better. Our Patreon numbers have dropped a little bit recently, and we do rely on this heavily for the show. It's literally how we keep the show going. And I've been throwing a few ideas around on ways to improve it. And one of them is that we take 200 of the 250 episodes and put them behind a paywall and just have 50 free ones. And then if you want the rest, you kind of have to subscribe. And I don't like that idea because I think all these episodes should be free. But also, we do have people behind the scenes and we have to keep a certain amount of money to keep the podcast going. And that's just how it is. So if you can pop over to Patreon, go and have a look and let us know what we can do better. Let us know what you'd like to see. And if you can sign up, it's £3 a month. It's like buying us a cup of coffee. You know, we put a lot of time and effort into this. If you can't, obviously we understand, just a 5-star rating, positive review, wherever you get your podcast might help somebody else find it. And then YouTube as well. If you can watch the episodes on YouTube, you can see all our pretty faces. And a lot of the times there are visual elements to them, which you're not getting that through just the audio. And I think that's it. But let's jump into today's show. I'm joined by my lovely co-host and in-house archaeologist, Mags Havgar.
Yo.
Is that it?
That's all I had to say.
Also, happy birthday for yesterday.
Thank you. My birthday was actually a few weeks ago, but a really good friend of mine, his birthday is in the middle of March. So we tried to celebrate together. So that's why we had our mutual celebration yesterday, like right in between.
Yeah, I just realized I already wished you happy birthday, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, so
I mean, keep it coming. I don't mind.
Yeah, well, I've outed myself there, haven't I? And I'm going to introduce our guest and a friend of mine, Sean Parry. Most people know Sean from his insanely good Nordic and Celtic tattoos. And Sean, you tattoo out of Sacred Knot Tattoo in Llandudno, North Wales. Yeah, that's all you're getting.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast yet again.
Yeah, it's been a few years, right?
It's been a while. Yeah.
I was trying to think earlier when the last time you were on, and yeah, I don't know.
I think last time I was on was when we were supposed to co-host together to interview Matthias Nordic, but there was a bit of a problem in the beginning, and I was late, and so I got on late onto the episode.
Yeah, okay. So that was that was a while ago. That was years
before my time, I think.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Time flies.
Well, let's have a little catch. These episodes will always be a little more lighthearted and fun than the super heavy scholarly ones, which I dare I say prefer sometimes.
Sure, variation is, spice of life.
Yeah, variation is always good.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about you for a little bit, catch up on the things you're doing. I know you're doing some fun things with music as well, but then also hopefully you're going to tell us some lovely little Welsh folklore tales.
I'm doing my best.
Well, you gave us a nice little thing before the podcast started about how you'd learn all these off by heart.
Yeah, well, as I said before, I grew up, with my grandmother, like reciting a lot of the stories that are literally woven into the landscape around us. Mm-hmm. I've always felt incredibly privileged to grow up in North Wales, where, like, say, the River Conwy has mythology that runs all the way through it. No pun intended. Like to do with, like, for instance, the sound that the river's supposed to make when it's receding back into the sea is known as the how to translate into English, like the yawn of Dolan, one of the Welsh sea gods, or it's supposed to be his father, like lamenting his death, and that's the sound that the sea makes as it's receding.
Oh wow, that's beautiful. And
love.
tragic.
Yeah, I mean, most Celtic stories are quite sad.
Sounds oddly familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I visited Wales last week, but in the middle of Wales, Pennant, I think
Yep.
it's, which is like right down there in the middle. I didn't realize how poor the road system into Wales was.
Oh, yes.
You leave England on motorways, and then you hit Wales, especially like into the middle of Wales, and it's just all really small roads that take a long time to get anywhere.
Yeah, with all of the mountain range in the middle, well, certainly around Snowdonia, it's very. There's actually quite good roads going through Snowdonia compared to most of the middle. For me in the north, to get down to South Wales, we have to. But it's quicker to go back into England and go all the way round,
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
and then to get to Cardiff that way. Otherwise, you can spend twice as long trying to drive through on, like pathetic little roads. So
Yeah.
what's really sad is that I know, well, I've been to Scandinavia more than I've explored Wales because it's so difficult to traverse.
Really?
Yeah, quite good with my geography in the north of Wales, but in the south, I haven't even been to St David's, which makes me a very pathetic Welshman. Especially in Goil Dewi Sands yesterday as well, on the 1st of March, St David's Day. So shame on me.
Yeah. What?
But I mean, the infrastructure is kind of that's what makes or breaks it, right? Just like you said, because I kind of have a similar experience with sometimes it hits me that I'm like, wow, I've really been just globe trotting more than I've been actually exploring my own country in the same way, because like getting to the north of Norway, unless I'm flying and that's extremely expensive, like getting to the north is quite difficult.
Yeah.
Like you have to really want to do it to spend the time and the effort to get there.
Exactly. It takes hours and hours to try and get anywhere as soon as you go off the beaten roads, which is one of the things that's quite wonderful about it in some ways, that it's still quite untouched in a lot of ways. There's parts of Wales that aren't so commercially built up because there's no tourism yet, and yet is the key.
Right.
It will.
Yeah.
But it's
So-
yeah.
I was just looking at where I was, see if I can
Like
give you.
pros and cons.
Yeah. I mean, I would say actually that's one of the reasons why, because I am a Welsh speaker. I would say that I'm second language. I wouldn't say that I'm first, but I have pretty decent Welsh. But like, the Welsh language mainly survived because it was so cut off from England. Obviously, with Wales being right next door to England, it's amazing that the Welsh language managed to survive when England was, the Great Britain, but basically
Doing the England thing.
yeah, going off and suppressing culture all around the world for hundreds of
Yeah.
whereas it was it was so difficult to get to parts of like the West Wales especially, that's one of the reasons it survived. And I'd say also on top of that is because it was so cut off, we managed to have continual revivals to keep the culture and the language going.
Yeah. So I was by Clanbryn Mare. Does that make sense? Like in the middle there.
Okay.
Like I was trying to look for like anything, a big town or anything near it, and oh no, like it took me an hour. I think we went for food. It took half an hour to find like a shop.
Could you say it again?
Clanbryn Mare.
So Llanbryn Mawr, maybe, like Llanbryn Mawr.
So LLANBRYNMAIR.
I'm not sure. I don't think I know that one actually.
Why don't you just copy and paste it into the chat, Dan?
Yeah, I should. Yeah, that would make sense.
Either way, I can only imagine that it was lovely.
So yeah, but basically, it was beautiful. I absolutely loved it. It was so untouched by modern standards,
Yeah.
that it was. But I think that's one of those things that it probably puts a lot of people off. And I said about tourism yet, that it was literally in the middle of nowhere. The closest shop was 20, 25 minutes away. There was no phone signal. So you were really isolated, which is lovely. But even myself, I have a business and I try to not be on social media too much. And I saw out being away from everything. But as soon as I was away from everything, that anxiety kind of grips you and it like takes a hold of your heart a little bit. And every like half an hour, you're like, I wonder if everything's still okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's real. It's very real.
Yeah, but I wonder if that's what keeps it so pure, is because everything around it, you have these pockets where people like me will go, but not everybody wants that.
Yeah.
So maybe if the infrastructure was there, then more people would flock, which you probably get in the more built up areas.
Yeah. I mean, Dan, as you know, because you've been to Llandudno, which is my hometown, where I moved back to here in North Wales. It is a classic British seaside town. So I've always been lucky to have like all of that kind of infrastructure around here. But like you go literally 5 minutes outside and you're in you're out in the wilderness, which is lovely. But even so, we don't have phone signal here. I don't even get phone signal in my own house. I have to connect to my Wi-Fi to be able to take calls.
Oh wow!
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's terrible internet. I always tell people whenever anyone comes here and they complain about the phone signal, I will say it's because. So I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but Welsh mythology was all compressed into a book that is known as the Mabinogion, and the stories are put into 4 branches, and the 3rd branch is about a story of Margrethe. And I'm not going to go into the story as of yet, but the only thing I'll say is that there's basically an evil wizard that puts a curse on all of the land, and it just takes away all technology, and everyone disappears, and they're just left in a barren landscape, and they end up having to leave Wales to go to England to go try and find work so they don't starve to death and die. And eventually the curse gets lifted, but I always say that the curse wasn't fully lifted, and that's why we can't get any decent phone signal.
I mean, checks out.
Yeah.
It's as good as excuse, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we've spoken about how kind of remote places are. Then does it blow your mind that you get people traveling from all over the world to this little town in Wales to come and have you draw on them? Because it's not like you're in Manchester with an airport there. People are flying into Manchester or Liverpool and then driving 3 hours to this little remote area that's not that easy to get to.
Yeah. Well, when I was looking into it, because I was living in Spain many years back for a year, and Denmark before that for a while, and so on. But I was looking at a map and I was considering where I wanted to move back to in Wales. At first, I kind of wanted to go down the Llyn Peninsula, which is like an arm off the northwest coast of Wales, because I wanted to be deeper in like a first language Welsh speaking community. But then I was looking at how difficult it would be for people to travel there. Mm-hmm. So from Manchester Airport to Llandudno, you can get a direct train, and it doesn't run very well on Sundays, as many people have found out. But on weekdays, it's a direct train, and a drive, it's about an hour and a half or so on. But if I was to go down the Llyn Peninsula with that infrastructure we talked about, it would have added on easily another 3 or 4 hours. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's why. And there are no trains that go there. You have to go on buses that will take like 10 hours and so on. So as much as I thought it was a lovely romantic idea, I was like, I want to be practical about this. If people are already traveling from, as far as like Australia and so on to go and get tattooed, I'm not gonna try and force them to do another marathon journey on top of that as well. So I
That's
thought
very kind of you.
I'm sure they would have.
yeah, well, possibly, but also selfishly, I didn't. Well, it. I love my hometown. I love being here. My family is here as well, and like the best part is like I said, there's nature all around here. Like the Great Orme, the Godgabs is like on my doorstep, and I like to try and go for a walk on there every day, and to be out and to see the goats and the seals and the seagulls. I saw a child today like getting attacked
Carried away by a seagull.
just 10 adult seagulls getting his ice cream off him, and the parents not knowing how to deal with it. You know, money can't buy that kind of experience.
Seagulls don't fuck with seagulls, man. Like I have had here in Oslo too, down by like the harbor, fucking seagull straight up try to grab a cheeseburger out of my hand while I was walking down the street. Like when I had my cheeseburger like in my mouth, and I was just like, bruh, come on.
It's real. Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone is listening to this, then that is going to come get a tattoo from Sacred Knot in North Wales, do not eat food outside. They will attack you and they will win.
Beware the seagulls.
I can attest for that firsthand as well, because there are little signs up that warn people of this. But being tourists, me included, I was like, I can eat these chips. Like I'll just sneak one out from the bag into my mouth and keep them covered up. Fucking no chance. They were on me. And as soon as that chip comes out of the bag, they're not scared. They're in there.
Smell weakness. Yeah, they know.
They do. There are scary things, but you have there's a lovely wildlife around there, and the Great Orme's beautiful. And I don't know, I feel like that kind of adds probably to everything. You know, if people are coming over to get tattooed by you, yeah, they could go to Manchester where you used to be and they'd get this awesome tattoo. But I feel like there's something almost ritualistic of coming out to this little village, not village, little town in Wales, and all this beautiful scenery, the wildlife. And I'm sure on an evening you'll get a chance to probably walk up there with them and teach them a little bit about everything. And it's this whole experience on top of getting the tattoo.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I always like, you know, draw little maps on postcards to tell people like where they can go to go see some of the local sites. So so we have the Bronze Age copper mine on top of the Great Orme, which is it's probably a 20-minute walk from the studio. It's going to be 5 minutes of car. That's literally where the Bronze Age, the British Bronze Age, basically started here in my hometown. The earliest metalworking site of Great Britain is on the side of the Orme. It was discovered by my friend Dave Chapman. You can look him up online. It's incredible stuff. What they have discovered in this town is rewritten British history. So I always send people off there to go have a look in the copper mine, and you've got the Iron Age hill fort that's overlooking Llandudno. You've got the remains of the roundhouses. They would have been the best views in town. They would have been really, really beautiful. And then got a Neolithic burial chamber. It's 5,000 years old. And then, well, the town itself is, at least 200 or 300 years old. I mean, it has, I think the oldest house here is 300 years old, which is obviously nothing by most standards, but it is a beautiful Victorian town, which has a charm
but
in itself.
Still standing? But it's still standing. Like, it's not just the fundament of the house. Like, it's the house itself is 300 years old.
Yeah.
That's decent.
Yeah. I mean, there's I would say just outside of Llandudno, there's a building that's 1,000 years old, but which is still standing. But like here in town, but there's so much like history around here, and for people that are more into nature, they can go either 10 minutes out and go for a walk on the mountains and go see the wild horses, or
Wait, what? Excuse me, back up for a second. Wild horses?
Yeah, we have the Welsh cobs, I think they're called. I mean, they are.
What in the actual Disney movie or DreamWorks movie spirit are we talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you can usually find them up on the Cynnyddau around. Well, they are in the Cynnyddau, but especially Pembermawr Mountain. So if you go up to it's called the Druid Circle, which is a Neolithic stone circle. They're usually around there, so you can, get two birds, one stone.
Wow. I mean, Dan, can we go?
We can go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to show you guys around if you want to come visit again.
I mean, amazing. I'd love to get tatted out. And like, as it sounds like the ultimate Archeo fest for me personally.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's a beautiful place. Yeah, Jennifer's just give us the title for the podcast. Two seagulls, one horse. There we go. Yeah, it is. I've recently just started watching Yellowstone and feel like I'm a bit of a cowboy now. So I might try wrangle a horse if I go up there.
Oh yeah, well, I would pay money to see that. That would be incredible.
I know, they make it look so easy on the TV show, and I'm like,
Dan is just desperate to have like more crazy stories he can talk about of how he got like stupidly injured.
Well,
that went down in history as one of the greatest moments in the cave for sure.
That's exactly what I was thinking about.
Max, it was not Sean's cave that I fell in, which could be a euphemism, but
hey,
but
you know what?
Sean's party was where I famously slipped and
bunked your head a little bit.
Headbutted a mountain.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to try and put something together again soon, so it would be lovely to have you there again sometime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if I can face it.
Yeah. Too much PTSD.
Yeah, face your fears.
Dan will bring like a little foldable chair so that he'll know that he'll be like he'll have more than just his 2 feet. Just like he'll be like his weight will be evenly distributed.
Well, a big helmet as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like those construction site helmets.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I could get my hands on some from like the archaeological basement somewhere. Be like, hey Dan, I think you're should need this. We could like spray paint the Nordic Mythology logo on it and everything.
Yeah, brand it.
I saw someone put in the comments just bubble wrap. I totally agree. Like, economical, practical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's a beautiful area of the world. Obviously, I think we spoke about this before, but like I say, it was a long time ago. And you're predominantly known for Nordic tattoos, or that's what, at least the last time we spoke, that was a lot of people were very kind of like Viking tattoos. And I know that your heart lies with Celtic.
Well, I would say it's very much 50-50 for me because I'm just interested in historical art.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, probably the last time we spoke, it was very heavily towards the Nordic. And I was doing like, let's just say like probably 80-90% like, Nordic-based tattoos. And over the
how many Ragnaroks?
Many Ragnarok sleeves. But that's the thing is I still like, I did, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a Ragnarok sleeve like last week or so, but I was so excited to get to be doing something like that because I'd been doing like a few of the like Neolithic based ones for a while, and I just always have so much passion for everything I get to do because like it's never lost on me like that I get to sit and draw all of my favorite things all day. Mm-hmm. Like compared to like the when I first started tattooing about 15 years ago. I was actually doing like the same sort of work then that I'm doing now, but it would be maybe like 1 in 30 tattoos would be something Celtic or Nordic based, and everything else was kids' names or portraits and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Which when I did that kind of stuff, I always took pride in the craft of my work, but I told myself that it was like it's okay, I just appreciate doing the work I really enjoy doing when I do it. But then when the breakthrough in my career was when I started hyper specializing and I stopped advertising that I would do a little bit of everything, that's when my career changed, and it gave me the opportunity to focus on like Celtic and Nordic. And for a long time, I focused heavily on the Nordic. And over the last few years, I've been trying to make it more of a 50-50 split, because there's way too much history that I want to explore and to delve into. There's the Nordic stuff, I say the Viking stuff, for instance, is amazing. Like, there's enough stuff in the Usserberg burial to enchant me for a lifetime.
We had Luciano on last episode.
For those you know me, I'm doing my PhD on the Olsberg art, so I'm like, yay, represent.
It's absolutely incredible stuff. And each artifact, has a story to tell in itself. You can see the work of each of the craftsmen in all of the pieces. But then let's just say that the Viking Age is obviously like classically like 300 years or so on. But then when you get into what is under the umbrella of Celtic, I know it's a problematic term, but Celtic is thousands of years. It's like, it technically, never stopped until the present day. So there's so many points of interest within that, because the artwork that you look at, like from Hallstatt in Germany, is so wildly different to what you get 2,000 years later in Ireland.
And you have Latin over there on the continent too, and then you have there's just so much stuff. Because I was really curious about what I'm seeing on your arm. Are those Bronze Age swirls?
This was one of my first attempts of Latin. So yeah.
I'm so proud of myself. Good job, Megs. I'm like, hey, that looks really familiar.
Yeah, thank you. But I'm glad you could tell what it was. But I will say that it's actually, it's pretty much spaghetti madness, because
sure,
I did it before I truly understood the art form. So for Viking art, you can buy books that will, there's some wonderful books out there that will say give very clear indications of how the language of the art works. Like let's just say you've got Ernest, and then you've got a head, then you've got a neck, then you've got an arm, and then you've got a body, and it does some figures of eights, and you just draw, a couple of those intertwining, and there you go. Bob's your uncle. But when
you make it sound so easy until somebody tries and does it.
That's how specialization works.
Yeah,
it's no biggie.
Yeah, but it's very well documented that that's how the art forms work. But when you look at some of the Celtic stuff, especially, I've been heavily researching Latin type 3, which is what they were practicing in Britain 2,000 years ago. 50 AD to 50 BC is when you see it at its high point. And you read what the academics say about that, and they're just like, it's just swirly and beautiful, and I really like it, and it's nice. But no one is willing to put the neck on the line of how they think the art form actually works. And for the longest time, I had no idea either how it worked until I started obsessively studying it, and I now have my own theories on how the language works.
That's so cool.
Do you think that is a language through the artwork? So anybody that hasn't listened to the last episode with Luciano, do definitely go and listen to it. But obviously, you know Luciano yourself, how he is similar, gets obsessive over the artwork and redraws and finds patterns that people necessarily don't always see.
Yeah.
And he was telling us about the language of the wagon and where he thinks that originated from. So do you think it's that similar type of thing, that it's the stories behind it?
Surprisingly, yes. So I will say, for also anyone else listening, I also will concur with you guys that Luciano's work is incredible, and you should check him out, and you should pay attention to what he's doing, because he's awesome. Luciano was a very big inspiration for me to really to kind of hyper specialize on some of more of the Celtic front. because I basically looked at the Nordic stuff and I was like, well, he's doing a fantastic job. And there's lots of other people that's got that covered. So I wanted to specialize into more of the Celtic stuff myself to kind of delve into that. And my studies of Viking artwork was the foundation for how I broke down the Celtic stuff in all of the different periods. And it's because I read many years ago about saying like, it was an offhand comment that I read somewhere about saying like the monks or the scribes that were working in Ireland, the Christian scribes of, let's just say, like 800 to 900 AD would have had nothing in common with the Iron Age artists of 50 BC. And there was no connection between them.
Sorry for chuckling there.
Yeah. And then when I was looking at the artwork, because it's horribly complicated, I had to sort of figure out and to back engineer all of these art forms to sort of see where they all come from.
Sure.
But I went on the wild goose chase, and I was very surprised to see that like you can pretty much follow, artifacts to artifacts, like showing like a clear linear progression of where these art forms come from. Like, and when I said about those monks, they were practicing what is known as Insular Hiberno-Saxon, which is basically it means like a conglomeration of the artwork of with the Saxons, the Jutes, and the native Romano-Britons, and basically anyone was around and how they all just like smashed all of their artwork together, and then you come out with the artwork that's in the Book of Kells, of that sort of style, because you can really see like how wildly different it is from the artwork of say the artifacts in Sutton Hoo to the Book of Kells. Like there's a very clear difference between them. And the Sutton Hoo, within the Sutton Hoo burial, there is a bowl that has some details on the bowl that are like clearly like what you would call like Latin. So, but all of those things were very separate at the time, and you can see how they all came together to make something new. So yeah. So this is what I do with my spare time.
I mean, that's just so cool. But I also love how I love the way you describe like your own experience-based knowledge of like pointing out that like, okay, when I did this tattoo on myself, like I didn't understand how the art form worked. But I assume that like, I don't think you said it specifically, but what it sounded like to me was that you basically said, with this tactile experience, I now understand the way these pieces fit together because I've worked with it. And therefore, it now makes sense to me in a way that it didn't before. But then if you hadn't practiced it, you wouldn't necessarily have that knowledge. Is that, am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also, the way that I practice all of my art forms is I draw them over and over on paintings or on my iPad, or I tattoo them on myself whilst because I was trying to develop a new way of expressing the art, and I won't tattoo on anyone else anything that I'm not comfortable with doing yet. So I did it on myself. And so whereas I said it's spaghetti madness, and it really, really is, but there's within Latin, for instance, you could see that the artist had a checklist of things that they were trying to achieve with their art. And by this point, I was aware of, let's just say, 3 or 4 out of 10 of the things necessary to do a good job. And I was looking at the time, and I drew it on myself, and I was like, yeah, I think that's good. I was aware at the time that I was like, I know it's not perfect, but I'm going to give it a go. I think it's going to be okay. And then as time went on, I was like, oh, I really, really messed up. That was not what it could be.
But it's a reminder of where you've traveled from and to where you are.
Absolutely.
Now, and I wish I could like stand up and show the Latin that you've done on my leg.
Why don't you?
Because it's a lot of effort.
Do it.
I'd have to stand on the chair, but the difference.
We should do some more in it soon, Don, and then we can take a picture and we can post.
Absolutely.
I have to say, just like on the record right now, I've been like playing around with getting some stuff on, like going from like my lower forearm to my hands, and just looking at your latin. I was like, if you would be interested at some point, I'd love to like brainstorm if you maybe want to do something.
Telling me, like asking me to do latin art is a absolutely hands down yes, I would love to.
I mean, awesome. I'll save up some money and then I'll hit you up.
That'd be fun.
Oh, this was one of the things I was seeing if I could join with my phone and I could post a picture, but I'll show you after, Mags.
Yes.
But I was wondering whether, when it comes to that split, do you get a lot of people asking or coming with Celtic pieces? Because I feel like it's not that. I don't know. It's probably not that well known amongst the masses. I don't know tons about like Celtic art, shamefully, and I feel like in the UK certainly, there's this hyperfixation on the Viking age because it's cool.
Yeah,
and we just don't
in the public imagination right now as well.
Yeah, we just don't really learn about the other areas of our history. Maybe we learn about Normans a bit, and that whole kind of, the Saxons and the Normans and the Battle of Hastings and that we learn about that, but we don't really look much further back. I don't think I ever remember learning about it.
Yeah, so it's not really covered because, well, especially like in in school, history starts with Romans.
Mm-hmm.
In Britain, especially, and that is the point of history, that because it was the Romans were writing, the ancient Britons weren't writing. People argue about saying Ogham is an ancient writing system, but like we don't have any evidence of it going back since before the Romans. And there's some people that argue that it's an elaboration on the existing formats.
Mm-hmm.
So I will just play devil's advocate and say, like, from there's things that that suggest that the Druids were probably because they had to practice at least like 30 different forms of communication. So they probably had their own writing systems. Hamish, one of my friends, was telling me as well that he read in a manuscript I think it was one of the few references to Druids in Scotland to do with the Picts, that they hired a Druid from Ireland to come over and to decipher some of the king's writing for the Pictish kings, suggesting that the Pictish kings had their own secret language, and this is one of the reasons why we can't read Pictish Ogham stones, because they don't want us to.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So, and there's many, I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent. There's many reasons why we don't know that, why I would say that we don't cover that much of the ancient Britons. And I think it's mostly because up until recently, we really, really didn't know that much about like how they would have looked, what their culture looked like. And with the Vikings, they've had a special treatment with, obviously with like the Wagner and all of that. Like they created an image for the Vikings before they actually had any archaeological evidence of how they looked. And what's amazing is and especially a lot of those Victorian paintings of the Vikings, they actually took Bronze Age armor from the Bronze Age and put them on the Vikings because it was the only ancient armor that they had, and they thought it looked cool, so they used what they had, and they created an image. So with the Celtic, within all the Celtic stuff, there is an idea in people's minds that we're all exposed to of like what they look like and what the culture look like, because we get exposed to it in different ways, like computer games, especially like was it? I can't remember what the different games. and for me as a kid, the Airfix models of like there was you had like the Romans and the ancient Britons, and you had the picture on the front like of the Celts riding the chariots with the blue swirly paint on them and all of that.
Yeah.
And that all comes from like Julius Caesar's own imaginings of the ancient Britons, and everyone just like went off that because no one else had anything else to go off for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that all of this is one of the reasons like that television hasn't tried to tackle it, because it would be so difficult to try and build all the sets and all the things necessary for it.
It is really hard to teach someone about something or spin off, like making like a fictionalized story of a historical period when you have very few like visual clues to guide you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is extremely, because I also think I love what you said about the Viking Age, because here in Scandinavia too, especially Norway, the Viking Age was used as like straight up propaganda to make like a collective national narrative of why Norway should be an independent country and stuff, like straight up propaganda.
Yeah.
So even though those visualizations from the 19th century might not necessarily be based on historical accuracy, it still created this visual expectation of the Viking Age that, you know, kind of lasts up until currently, still using it, even though we're not aware of it. But since that hasn't necessarily been applied to other types of culture or terms that we use to refer to different cultures, like Celts and Picts, then it's like we don't even have like a fictionalized visualization to guide us.
Exactly. Yeah. And I haven't even bothered trying to watch the new Boudica film that came out because
I was just about to say I'm surprised there hasn't been a Boudica film, and then I googled it, found out there was 2 years ago. Well, probably only about a year ago because we're early in the year. Never heard about it.
Yeah, I don't watch much television as it is, but you know, I would put money on it that they didn't go out their way to try and, you know, train up 50 charioteers to raid Colchester, because, you know, that's one of the things, like, you know, when they make Viking shows and films now, it's not that difficult to put a Viking ship prow on
because we have a couple.
Yeah, you have a couple already, whereas the whole thing of having master charioteers with with all the chariots and the roundhouses and those villages and hill forts to go along with them don't exist, and no one is building them because there hasn't been enough of a snowball effect to go with that yet.
I will say, tangent, if someone is extremely interested in like a fictionalized Celtic fantasy thing, there is a very underplayed fantasy series out there that I was obsessed with as a teen. I recently reread the first few books. Not all elements have aged that well, but it is extremely interesting because that author, she took a heavy deep dive into what we actually do know, and she altered the language of how she wrote the book. Like, she doesn't refer to trousers or pants. She exclusively refers to brigga, and like she explains how you pronounce different place names and everything. And that fantasy series is called Devry Cycle by Catherine Kerr.
Oh.
So check that out if you guys are interested in it, because that, honestly, not gonna lie, that series got me to study archaeology, because in her notes of the book, she was like, yeah, I tried to base it off as much of Celtic culture as I could, but there isn't really much out there. And then I started going, why don't we know that much about the Celts? And then it snowballed, and I started studying archaeology. And now I'm doing Vikings, which is like, you know,
traitor.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll put my shame cap on. But
you know, as long as we have these gateway drugs, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
But it is, though. I heavily got into the whole Viking stuff from TV shows. Like that was one of the ways that and I've said that on here before. Unashamedly. Why can't
Unashamedly?
I say that? Unashamedly. Why can't I say that today?
Unashamedly.
That's a word I'm familiar with as well. I've said that a few times, that's kind of what triggered. And then I did what I do best and hyper obsessed and build a business around it, and a podcast and everything else. But that was my way in because I didn't have anything that kind of got me in there. So there, as much as some people complain about their accuracies, they have their place with the dice. Then what people choose to do with it, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. And I, when I first started getting into all of the the Viking stuff as well, like the first Jorvik that I went to many years ago, uh, me and my friends were basically dressed like clowns. We cobbled together our own our own kits. It was very fantasy inspired.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And we, and I know for a fact that all the reenactors would have been, pointing and laughing at us because we looked like idiots. But the thing is, we had the best time. We had so much fun, and that's where I think it's really important for people to remember, like that, like with all of this stuff, whatever your angle is with it, you have to, remember that people are all approaching it from different angles, and you shouldn't be judging people by your own standards of what you're trying to achieve with what you're doing.
100%.
Yeah. And for people that like, if you see people and they're dressed, more like, Viking Goth edgelords with, with crazy fantasy swords and things, and they're a Viking.
Studded leather armor.
Yeah. Like as long as they're having a great time and they're not hurting anyone, then I fully support it.
100%. That's the same thing I have with like, as long as the only time I have issues with things just because of miscommunication and disinformation is if I'm in an awkward position where someone is trying to pass something off as historically accurate, and I'm like, oh no, but if someone's just out there just having a good time and playing around with stuff to have a good time, then I'm like, who the fuck cares?
Exactly.
Go have fun. Do exactly what you want.
Yeah, it's what it comes down to, as well as the terminology that we use for it, because the difference in between reenactor and LARP. As long as because I think that it's just important to remember that why most of us are into this stuff, and that because I can only say that I feel so incredibly blessed that I have a burning fire of passion for archaeology and mythology and all of this stuff and art just in general. But I feel like I have purpose in my life, and I'm very grateful for it because a lot of people don't. And the fact that I'm here chatting to you guys about all of this stuff is a wonderful example of all of this stuff brings us together in a way that most people don't find in their lives anymore in the modern world. So we should be encouraging each other and being positive, instead of being so hypercritical. And as you said, the whole thing, if people are if they are passing things off as reenactment, when it should be more LARP, it's I do think it should be approached, but to be done with kindness and not with gatekeeping.
Yeah, and not with the aggressive pointy finger being actually that's not correct.
Yeah, it's a difficult track because it's especially when there are things that are close to our hearts, it's very easy to go down some of those tracks. But I'll stop ranting about it now. I just think it's one of those things as I've gone further down this track that I think about more and more, is it's important for us to approach each other with kindness and to remember why we're doing this.
Yeah, and I also think that I've noticed this myself of if everything is always based on 100% accuracy and doing everything correctly, just speaking from personal experience, I lose my interest and curiosity in it. Yeah. Because I'm just so scared of messing up, and it's just having to make sure that everything is done right is too exhausting for me to keep up with it. But then I really love what you said, Sean, because I feel like it's just kind of boiling it down to, instead of policing, nurturing curiosity and discovering stuff together. If we do that, then everything just automatically is more fun.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's a real risk that, especially what I've seen within the Viking reenactment, of how people are they're basically calcified in their approach to Viking reenactment. In the sense of, I've heard a group saying like, oh yeah, we don't have helmets with cheek pieces because there's no evidence of hinges in the Viking Age. And I'm like, oh my God. So you're not allowing like cheek pieces in your reenactment? Like there's evidence of them using like leather, on like boxes and things, as just using a leather hinge. You could you could have cheek pieces made of leather, and there's so many aspects of it, of like the Oseberg tapestry is a fantastic example of seeing like different costumes that people would wear, and maybe they would only wear them for ceremonial events, but there's so many outrageous like dresses on men and women. And you can go to Viking reenactments and you see everyone walking around in exactly the same thing, and people like saying like, oh, you're not allowed to have this and this because there's no evidence of it. It's like, well, there's only like 10 shoes that have been found from the Viking Age, and there's like 3 or 4 helmet pieces. So there is room for a certain amount of creativity within certain boundaries that I do feel like there's room for exploring.
Yeah, exactly. If your goal is accuracy, and then I think if your goal is just to have fun, just fucking wear whatever you want. Like dress up as Legolas. I don't care. Have fun. Like do just like fully do like a Ren Fair attitude to it. Just being like, I'm just wearing like, this is a spag bowl of just like a bunch of different shit put together because I feel fucking fly right now.
We should get into some folklore.
Yes.
But I do want to say on the back of that conversation, I also think that people don't fucking listen as well. As much as I hate like the whole gatekeeping thing, and not telling people what to do, but sometimes people will be just spouting the wrong thing. And obviously we all know that I like a Facebook group in here and I like to get in there, and a lot less than I used to, and I just try my best to like help people out.
Dan is into like psychological self-harm.
Yeah. And the amount of times that somebody will be wrong with something, and I will take an episode from the podcast and be like, here's a conversation about this with, I think the last time I did it was Leisha Gadewa, one of the top scholars, like a ridiculously smart guy. And I like said, look, have a look at this. Just listen to this. And then it's like, no, scholars don't really know. I can't remember the term they used, but it was basically like scholars don't know everything or something. And it was just like, put my hand, like head in my hand, and was just, well, what do we do then? Because you're just some guy from Tennessee who thinks that he knows the best, and you've been presented with somebody who has literally studied this probably his entire adult life and really knows stuff, and you just go, no, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like it, therefore false.
Yeah. How do you kind of get in there without kind of...
You know what? I feel like that comes down to if that person is disinterested in having their opinions changed, there's nothing we can do. No. So it's a bit of a live and let live type situation where it's like, you know what? I can do as much as I can to put the correct information out there for it to be available, but I cannot actually force this person's opinion and view of the world to change, unfortunately. And it's not my job either.
No,
I mean, I will say that I think it's wonderful that the podcast has like tackled so many like touchy subjects within the scene, and I fully support you guys, for doing that. And I think it's natural that past the point, like like when people have been so horribly cruel online, it's natural that you want to have that you'll want to stand up for your work and what you're doing. And it's just one of those things that's painful that most people, well, my sort of attitude towards the internet now is I basically just don't argue with anyone, because I've never seen it ever achieve anything.
Yeah, nobody ever goes, Yeah, you know what? Actually,
Yeah.
I agree with. You're right. You're right with that.
But the thing is what I will say is like when people have given me sources that I don't know about, and if I'm unaware of something on a subject, that's the thing is I have gone away and I have done research on it. So, but I think it's just one of those. I mean, the internet is mostly one of those things. If it's kind of like an alchemy that you just put things out into the ether and you have no idea how it's been consumed or used or like seen in any way. And I think it's also just one of those things that as a creator that you just have to accept that there's some very nasty bitter people out there that are just going to give you flack for daring to
Oh yeah, I'll never forget when within 2 weeks when me and Matthias.
Oh, I know what's coming.
Well, no, within the podcast when me and Matthias were doing, we did a string of episodes. I think one was called Vikings Are Gay, and within 2 weeks we got called like Nazi sympathizers and like super left leaning Jew lovers or something, and it was like, what?
Yeah.
Like we're with the polar opposite ends of the scale here. Within 2 weeks, we were just getting thrown all these slurs, and we're like, we must be doing something kind of right then, I guess, if we're just upsetting everyone.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that episode, and I thought it was wonderful that you approached it because it's one of there's so many people have a tendency to superimpose themselves and their own morals and all of this onto people of the past.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And that always needs to be challenged because it's one of those things that's so insidious that like of how it paints the way that we look at the past and how important it is to reassess it and to remember that because one of the first things I always say to people is like, I think I would have despised most Vikings. I bet most of them were horrible, horrible people. Like there were some lovely craftsmen amongst them. I say that, no, they were probably horrible people too, but like fantastic work. I really, really appreciate their artwork. But and there has always been good people and horrible people in the past. We see it, it's well documented through literature. But it's one of those things that's so important not to superimpose yourself onto the past. And that's one of the
No, sorry, I cut you off. Please,
No.
finish.
I was just going to say, and that's one of the reasons that we get so many weird hairstyles in Viking reenactment.
100%. And I also think that what you said now made me think of two things. And the first thing is that I think what you're saying now, like, that is so important because as we can see currently going on in the world, without necessarily getting into specifics, the important thing about being aware of whether or not you're superimposing yourself on your view of the past is that it is and has been for literally centuries, but is also currently very, very like relevant to whatever's happening in the world, different places, being weaponized to put people in their place. And the thing is that if we remember to challenge our perception of the past, then that weaponization is less likely to work.
Yeah.
And the second thing that I was thinking about when you said what you just said is that I've been thinking about this a lot. Like sometimes I get asked, not as much anymore, but when I was a guide at the Viking Ship Museum, and also like I would get questions sometimes from kids being like, oh, like if you had a time machine, would you go back to the Viking Age? And I would never really know how to respond. And then like I've been thinking about it for a while. And now, like, when you said that about, like, how you would view Vikings, I think if I had a time machine and I went back to the Viking Age, like, I wouldn't even know how to characterize a good person versus a bad person from their own perspective. I think to me, everyone would just be like, you all need, like, heavy amounts of therapy and you need to figure your shit out. This is not healthy. This is very destructive for everyone involved. Also, who am I to judge? But I don't even know how I would even access the cultural language of whatever is happening. I think I'd just be sitting there being like, a lot is happening right now, and I feel very exposed, and it is extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, it would suck. It would be tough because it was just tougher. Things were different.
Yeah, and they had like like today we have cultural codes that we don't even think about. So if I had a time machine and went back to the Viking Age, I think I would just stick out like a sore thumb because I wouldn't know what to do with myself because there would be so many customs that I would have no idea even existed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd just
Yeah.
sit there being like, I'm going to make an ass of myself regardless of what I do or how I speak, or because there are so many just preconceptions of how a person acts in different situations that I have like no basis of knowing about.
But I think we have that today with other cultures around the world. There are some that people intrinsically say, "Oh, well, this group of people are rude," and it's not necessarily that they're rude. It's just maybe they're not. Their culture isn't the same as ours, and they don't do things the same. So it comes across to us as maybe being rude, but to them, that's just normal. That's just how you act every day. And I guess it could be that similar sort of thing. It's what is normal to us in our little area isn't exactly the same everywhere.
Yeah,
But should
folklore.
Yeah, folklore. Let's get to some folklore
Folklore.
because we have Claire joining us after to tell us a lovely story as well.
Oh, wonderful. Well, so I was thinking. So I've touched on like the Mabinogion a little bit and how it's, but I reckon that's probably one of the better known stories that's out there. So for those that have no idea what I'm talking about, the Mabinogion is basically Welsh mythology. It was all it was written down in, let's just say, around about 1300 or so is the earliest accounts that we have from it. I think from 1382 possibly. It is thought that the stories, as in the form that they are written down, were from literally like the 11th century, but there's definitely there's references in earlier poetry to some of the characters in action doing things, kind of like how there's kennings in the Nordic stuff. But there's many things that allude to the stories being much older, but whether or not like those tales are the tales that they would have been telling 1,000 years before, we don't know. Obviously, there's no way that we can truly know, but there are certainly elements within it that are kind of, stereotypical themes and stories, the themes that go on within the tales. Like say within the second branch of the Mabinogion, there's a giant king called Bran or Bendigeidfran, Bran the Blessed, and he's in conflict with an Irish king called Matholwch. There's a big misunderstanding, a kerfuffle, because he has a half brother that's a dick, and he messes up all of these peace treaties that are going on by maiming a load of horses. And yeah, it's a long, complicated story. I'm not going to go into it because I would take take half an hour to tell it. But what I was going to say is that in compensation for the horses, Bran gives to Matholwch all of a new herd of horses to replace the ones that were spoiled. A staff of silver as thick as his little finger and is as tall as him, and he's supposed to be a giant, so I imagine he had very thick little fingers as well as being very tall. And as well as that, he returns to them the cauldron of rebirth. And in the tale, it says that the cauldron originally came from Ireland and that they had stolen it on a raid. And he gives it back to Matholwch and to the Irish as compensation. And it is said that if you throw dead warriors back into the cauldron, they will come back to life. They will be mute and unable to speak, but fit as a butcher's dog and ready to fight. So the cauldron of rebirth is the concept of the cauldron pops up in many things and is possibly where the idea of what is it in some of the later Arthurian stuff of the what is it, the chalice or the thing they're all obsessed with?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember what it's called either.
The fancy cup in Indiana Jones. Yeah.
Oh,
is it the Holy Grail
Holy
we're talking
Grail?
about?
Holy Grail, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Holy Grail, yeah.
So in case you haven't noticed, I'm I'm basically not interested in anything like after Geoffrey of Monmouth and what Geoffrey of Monmouth did. So when all of those Arthurian tales become like, you know, those high medieval things with, you know, Lancelot. Lancelot isn't in any of the original Welsh tales, and you know, when it gets to all of that point, it's not my bag, and it's when the Normans invade Britain and they interact with all of the Welsh bards, and those tales all get transported to the continent, and they elaborated on them and they spread like wildfire. It's really, really interesting. I'm personally more interested in what happened before all of that, and what the native sources were, to try and back engineer them back as far as we can. And within the tale of Bendigeidfran, like there's some little clues in it that are very interesting. Like, it's said that he is a giant, but when he crosses the sea over to Ireland to go save his sister, Branwen, it's said that he walks across the sea. All of his army is in ships that follow him, but he walks across the sea because it says that the sea wasn't as deep in those days, which is very interesting because, well, it was a very, very long time ago that the sea wasn't as deep. And then you have the tales. There's a story from here in Llandudno, of my hometown, of my primary school was named after Margrethe, which means, and it's the Sea of Rhianedd. And in that tale, it was about the land that used to be between North Wales and Anglesey, and we have names of all of the kingdoms that used to be out on these these flat plains. And then within that tale, something happens, and basically a young warrior kills an older warrior. He basically just takes him out in the dark from behind, like just stabs him in the back because he wants to steal his torque and his arm rings. So he has like the trappings of a warrior, so he can marry the chieftain's daughter. And the soul of the warrior rises, and he says, what you've done is so unfair that in a year and a day, I am going to send a tidal wave, a tsunami that is going to destroy everything and everyone you know. And he's off hunting on that day because he didn't take it seriously, or either he's a coward, and he was up on the mountain and he watched the land, and he watched the sea come in and roll in and just swallow up everything.
Oh man!
But like, what is fascinating about it is like we know for a fact there was land out there, but whether or not that was 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, 7,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, we don't know. But it's really interesting to think like some of these stories might have origins back in possibly the last ice age, and there's literally no reason why some of these storytelling traditions couldn't have passed on some of these details that have gotten to us now.
Oh, I love that so much.
I feel like this might happen with like a lot of folk tales where somebody does something and then coincidentally a cataclysmic event happens and the people around are just kind of like, that's your fault that. You caused that. Like he killed somebody, which is obviously a terrible deed, but then the land was swallowed by the ocean and everybody around was just kind of like, that's you did that. And then
but I find that so interesting because to me it speaks to this this kind of global phenomenon that I think actually genuinely still happens to a certain extent, even though we live in this kind of false narrative of we know so much about how the world works, so we obviously know how everything functions. Tangent anyway. Yeah. But that like when something so destructive or cataclysmic happens, there has, like, it can't just be cosmic randomness, right? Like there has to be some sort of reason, and then therefore naturally kind of retconning it in hindsight, going like, well, you fucked up, so obviously this is on you.
When I was a kid,
scapegoat.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because it makes sense. Because why else would it happen, right? Why else would we have to suffer this horrible event that just came out of nowhere?
Mm-hmm. Everyone wants a reason. But yeah, when I was a kid, I had pretty bad OCD to the point of, like where if you move something, it has to go back exactly where you moved it from, or I'd like I'd play games with myself where I'd be like, I have to throw this bit of paper in this little ring over there 10 times in a row, or everybody I've ever loved is gonna die.
Oh my God.
Something fucking terrible like that. And I'd stay there like for hours doing it until like I did it 10 times in a row. And I'm like, whew, it's all right. Everybody's gonna be okay. And I would just, for some reason, I just had this thing for years and years. But
That's gotta have been exhausting.
yeah, it was. I mean, it was just, I didn't realize at the time that's what it was. But if I was in doing one of those little moments, and then say there was a plane crashed outside or something, probably in that moment when I was younger, I'd be like, that's my fault. I fucking didn't throw the little paper in the bin, and the plane crashed. Like, that's me.
Yeah.
Oh my God, my heart goes out to little Dan, just being like, oh no.
And I used to have to line everything up. It was quite frustrating. Like, I'd have to like line all the edges of the coasters up with the end of the tables and stuff.
Sounds like a genuine problem.
And make sure I don't know what happened. It just disappeared one day. But yeah, it's like all the papers had to be lined up and everything. Or like a bit like something bad's gonna happen. But there's lots of people have that. I'm sure there's loads of people listening to this will.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have it to a degree as well.
I think we spoke about it before.
Yeah, yeah. I would always play all of these silly little games in my mind to distract myself. As even when I'm walking, I have a very elaborate thing of like where I stand and what, standing on cracks and things, alternating between different beats and so on. But well, that's what's fascinating, isn't it? Is like all of these things of how they will have changed and adapted stories over the centuries, and you've got to wonder, like, thankfully we know that within, like, especially within the bardic traditions, they purposely try to keep things as straightforward and pure as they could, and they did for a very, very long time, as much as they could. And this one, we still have a festival called the Eisteddfod that was a continuation of this tradition of upholding the arts. The bardic tradition was considered as the number one, and it's why it's named after it, which is it's the seating of the bard. And every year they give a throne out, like a fancy carved chair, to the person that does the best poem. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's just winning a throne. When's the last time you entered a competition for a throne?
I mean, I wouldn't mind.
I haven't dared to ever try and submit any of my work because I don't feel like it's up to standard yet. But I aspire to it, and one day I hope to. But I'm not there yet. I'm still studying. But and that festival's been going for about 1,000 years. It had one or two breaks in the middle of it, but it's thought
that's a flex. Excuse me, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. But like, this festival casually, it's just been going for the past literal like millennia.
Yeah,
that's a big ass flex.
Yeah. It's. I mean, then it's the reason I'm sharing this stuff is because I as I've already said, like, I love the Viking stuff. I really, really do. It brings me so much like joy and passion. But I want to share this stuff because so many people don't know these things because Wales is overlooked. Like you got the hierarchy of like Ireland is the coolest of the Celtic countries, and then Scotland, and then Wales, I guess, and then probably onto so on, Cornwall and Brittany, but it's I think that all history and all culture should all be shared because it really helps. It really helped me to like cross compare all of this to see like how it all influenced each other over time. So all of these tales that I've been sharing, they would all have been told in the Viking Age, and Vikings would have heard these stories and they would have transported them to the other side of, their known world, and they would have shared little bits and pieces of it, and it would have influenced other stories. Because they were not as solid back then, I believe, as they are necessarily now. We in these days, I've had so many people give me flack about saying, like, especially like say with which wolf it was that ate the sun. It's,
Yeah.
you've said that it's this one, but really, but that it wasn't Fenrir, Skola Hati or blah blah blah. Whereas back then, I'm sure there would have been extremely strong traditions, but like you could literally go over the mountain and they would have had a different tradition of how they were told.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think that people need to accept that more than anything when it comes to probably two things that when anybody gets into this whole sphere of things like the Viking Nordic stuff that you have to remember. One is be comfortable, like just knowing that we know very little. Like just be comfortable in that, and it's okay to be in that. But and the other one is just be understanding that there isn't a strict dogma or set of rules or stories, and that's it. And anybody that hasn't listened to the episode with Mateus we did last, I think we called it Old Norse Doesn't Exist, I think was the name.
Old Norse mythology doesn't exist.
Yeah, and it's that idea that people are so fixated on this story and arguing about the details of one story that we have from Snorri and who did this, who did what, when in reality these were all ever changing and different. They were different depending on where you were, the time period. They would have changed, like I say, over the mountain, and this kind of hyperfixation on the details needs to kind of disappear a little bit and have more fun with it. It can be many different things. And that's why I love hearing all these different stories.
Yeah, because we've talked about that before, about how like just because there are different versions of the same story doesn't mean that they're not both true. Both can be true, and that there's probably I'm going to be repeating myself a little bit here because I know for a fact that we've talked about this before, but I can't remember exactly which episode. But the fact that I'm not saying that writing is bad necessarily, but just the way that we approach stuff that is written today, compared to, since we don't really have an oral based knowledge system anymore to the same degree, that it's like, oh, well, if it's written, that's the way it is, period. We're done. And then like, if there are two versions of the same story, we kind of have to figure out which one of them is the quote unquote correct one. Whereas when we're dealing with mythology and legends and just straight up stories, regardless of what you want to call them, that come from, oral based societies like, Celtic areas, regardless of what area we're talking about, and Viking areas, that they were organic. They would probably be they would probably be rigid and fluid at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. There's examples of some Celtic stories involving some of the Irish heroes. I can't remember which ones exactly. But like there's versions of some of those stories in Scotland from the 1800s where you've got this ancient Celtic hero, except in this story, he's running around with a gun. He's doing exactly the same things, but he has the latest technology.
Yeah.
And then as an example, the other way, in Norse mythology, Thor rides around on a chariot. And as far as we know, they were not using chariots at that anymore. So we can only assume there's probably a hangover from the Bronze Age. But it was such an iconic idea that that idea persevered through the stories, and people kept it there because it enchanted people and people enjoyed it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think
it served a purpose.
Yeah.
We've all played the game Telephone.
Yes.
And we played that. If you play that with 10 people, you get something wildly different at the end. Now, play that game across 50 years, 200 years. And also each time you tell the next person might be a week or 2 weeks apart, if not longer. And see what happens when you get from one side to the other.
And also, while this game of telephone is happening, the language is slowly changing.
Yeah.
And the meaning of the words are slightly changing. Exactly. And the connotations of what that word can refer to is slightly changing.
Yeah.
Oh, and that clan over there might also come and kill a bunch of your people. So you might want to weave that in there because that was a big event.
Well,
Yeah.
they'll come in, they'll kill your best storyteller, and then like the person that the person that told it like with the least pizzazz,
Yeah, yeah.
pass it on, and he doesn't remember all the details, and he just
Oh, he's got to just fill bits in. Yeah. Oh no. All right, let's wrap this up, and then we'll do the Q&A where we'll hopefully do a few more folk tales, and I want to cover my favorite Welsh folklore about corgis and fairies.
Oh,
So,
let me know, because then I'll get Ibsen over here, so
Yeah.
he won't be able to hear it, but he'll be present.
He'll know. He's a
So
corgi.
guys,
He
sign up
knows.
for Patreon so that you can, watch me holding a corgi while we're talking about corgis in Welsh folklore.
Yeah, I recently learned this one and I loved it. I can't believe I didn't know about this earlier. Sean, where can people find you and your work and follow you?
So I post sporadically on Instagram mostly, and Sacred Not Tattoo. I am on Facebook as well, but Instagram is basically where I post. Yeah.
Mhm. Wonderful. Mags, what about you?
A bit of similar situation to Sean's there. When I do post once in a blue moon, or I'm just active on social media, you can find me on Instagram, and my handle is Archeomags, Archeo with a K.
There we go. And to copy that sentiment when I ever get around to posting, also, it's Daniel_Farrand1 when I do little videos on history, which I quite enjoy doing. It's on there. Horns of Odin for the business. And then Nordic Mythology podcast across the board, YouTube. Like I say, hit the subscribe button. There is a visual element to this, and you do get a lot from that. There's a lot of things that get missed in the audio ether. Sean, thank you so much for joining us. It's been lovely.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on again.
No, you're welcome. It's been wonderful catching
This was
up.
so great.
I love these episodes where we planned nothing. You were like, what are we going to talk about? And I was like, we'll just catch up and maybe throw in some Welsh folk tales if you can.
Yeah.
And that was the plan. And
well, if we can do this again sometime, I would love to share with you the story of how Snowdon got its name in Welsh. But
Ooh, follow-up episode. I'm here for it. Let's do it.
Yeah, because we could talk for hours. And
literally,
we'll do another one, and we'll do, because we didn't even talk about your music. Your lovely music you've been making.
I have some recorded now. I'm still working on it, but I'm getting there. But it's because I've been building all my own instruments from scratch.
Of course you have.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, let's just pause it right there, and we'll take that, and then we'll get into that in the next episode, because that sounds interesting as fuck.
Next time as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll do music, chat, and put the world to rights, and learn about Snowdon, which I tried to walk up when I was in Wales and got rained out off. It was fucking awful.
Well, come to Wales sometime this summer and we'll go up it together.
Yeah, it was, honestly, it started hailing about 40 minutes in, and poor Rocco was like cowering down.
Oh, little baby.
The last time I went up there, we went all the way up and came back down, but on the way back down it hailed then as well. And he'd never seen hail before and kind of cowered. And I had to shelter over him because because the hail was hitting me and it was hurting me. So for him, he just didn't know what to do. So he just froze and kind of cowered. So he now thinks that we go to this little this mountain in Wales, get out of the car, walk until it starts to hail, and then we walk back to the car and he gets back in it. So that's now his thought of this place. So we need to go when the weather's nice and he can have a nice memory of this, because he's just like, motherfuckers. Every time I go here, I get hailed on and then thrown back in the car wet. Well, let's do a Q&A and let people ask you some questions.